Good Monday morning from Mr. Small's Theater. This is Guyke's Got Game. I am Guyke. I am Matt Gajtka, Matt G-A-J-T-K-A. This is my show, but on a different day for the first time, I believe ever, in 3.5 years of doing this program. We're starting your week instead of ending your week, and I'm very happy to do so. It works better for all involved, so look for this program every Monday at 9 a.m., The sun is streaming through the window. Well, we have the curtain up, but the sun would be streaming through the window. It's a beautiful day in Pittsburgh if you like cold and crisp, which I don't mind. And, hey, the wind's not blowing and the snow's not blowing, so an easy commute for me down here to Millvale, meeting up with my friend Brian Crawford, whose River Talk show, by the way, is up next at 10. So we have a couple of power hours for you on Monday morning on the River's Edge, which is found, of course, at riversedgepgh.com. That's where you can locate the live stream podcast as well as our live video stream. Or you can go over to Facebook. I always stream it at Matt Gajtka Media, and that's, again, my name, M-A-T-T-G-A-J-T-K-A, Media, and I have it there. We have it on the River's Edge Facebook page, too. So tremendous to be with you. Thanks, NyQuil, for your help last night in getting to bed. Of course, it's always like that, isn't it? When you know you have to get up a little bit earlier, and I know 9 o'clock isn't that early for most people, but I work in sports media, so my times, my circadian rhythms are pushed a little bit further ahead. For instance, this past weekend, working for Robert Morris University down at the RMU Island Sports Center, covering a couple of men's hockey games as media relations director for the team. I'm up until 1 and 2 a.m. doing work, so yeah, it's tough to recalibrate and get things back on track. Thanks to my son Lukas for being so chatty this morning and helping to get me out of bed. And also, like I said, thank you to NyQuil. I played some pickup hockey around 8:30 to 10 o'clock last night down in Harmerville at the Alpha Ice Complex. Always tough to settle down after that. I don't know how big-time pro athletes get to bed at a reasonable hour without any kind of, well, shall we say, chemical assistance, because I'm keyed up after an hour and a half of skating with the old-timers down there. But at any rate, I'm here with you. I'm awake. I am alive as best as I can tell, and this is not a dream sequence. This is Guyke's Got Game for your Monday. I'm happy to say that we'll go back to the guest line for the first time in a while here. My good friend Alan Saunders of various outlets will be joining me around, well, call it 9:20, and we'll talk about anything and everything. That's why I like to have Alan on. He's been our most frequent guest on this show because I can pop any kind of question to him, and he's not too taken aback, and he always has some sort of a take on it. So Alan will be our guest this morning. Prime topics, though, coming up, the culture of firing in sports. You hear it all the time, and in some cases it's justified, in some cases it's not, in my opinion. But when a team isn't doing well, when it's not meeting expectations, fire the coach, fire the general manager, sell the team. You hear that from Pirates fans a lot, and like I said, it's not always without merits, but in a lot of cases it is. So why does sports make us think differently than other industries, than other walks of life? We'll dig into that with a Penguins-related case. In fact, there are a couple of different ways that this ties into the Penguins this season as they now charge back up toward the top of the standings. For a while, though, I think a lot of you out there were thinking, is it time for a change upstairs? And also a team that the Penguins just beat. Well, maybe they should be looking into a change upstairs, but we'll dig deeper into that topic a little bit later in this hour. Also, an age-old debate, football versus baseball. In fact, that's what we're going to lead this show with. It's come to a head in the form of a prominent athlete right now who has a big choice to make. In fact, he has a big choice to make in the next several hours. His name is Kyler Murray. Perhaps you've heard of him, big football star at the University of Oklahoma, but he also could have a promising baseball career ahead of him, and I'll talk about why he might have a clearer answer to that dilemma than you might think, and I'll also tell you what I would tell him. I know he's not asking me, but if I were advising the young man, what I would say, and it might not be exactly what you think I would say, so I could be defying your expectations in just a moment here on this show. Also, the brainwashing of my only son continues as his young hockey career is off to a wonderful start, and I say that with tongue firmly planted in cheek. Also, we do have the best thing on the sports internet for the weekend, and that'll be a recurring segment here on the Monday edition of Gike's Got Game. And Pittsburgh-Philadelphia, a rivalry that might be overrated in some ways. We'll talk to Alan about that, and I'll give you my thoughts and feelings on it before we wrap up the program. But before we get further into it, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter. I already told you the Facebook profile page. I'm on Twitter at Matt Geitka, and very simple there. When you have a name like mine, you don't need to have any underscores or asterisks or funky characters. It's just my name. No spaces. Matt Geitka, just slammed together. And you can also feel free to tweet at me during the show if it's live. Of course, you can find the archive version at riversedgepgh.com. So, okay, let's get into it. Baseball versus football, chapter 13,498. Of course, these two sports have been going head-to-head. They've been colliding like the two helmets on Monday Night Football for 40 or 50 years. And some would say that football has had the edge over baseball as the national pastime since Monday Night Football really got going in the early 70s, since the AFL and the NFL merged. We just passed the anniversary of Super Bowl III, when the Jets defeated the Colts, the Jets of the old AFL, the American Football League, the Colts of the traditional NFL. The Baltimore Colts were considered to be the big favorite there, but Joe Namath and the Jets upset them, and that maybe didn't directly lead to the merger between the two leagues, but it helped bring the two together, and it created a monolith with the help of Commissioner Pete Rozelle and his national television deal and his revenue-sharing program, the way that he helped equalize all the teams in his nascent new league with the help of the old NFL teams and the new AFL teams. Football captured everyone's imaginations. NFL Films, the folks over there, Steve and Ed Sable, they're a big reason why I fell in love with football at a young age. And as I've talked about on this show, I've fallen out of love with football for the most part at this point. But there's no questioning the telegenic nature of it. There's no questioning the hold it still has over the American sporting populace. Or even the people who don't watch sports still pretty much know that, for instance, the Patriots won their playoff game yesterday, that the Saints prevailed over the Eagles in a close one. People just know about football because it's on network television. You just have to watch once a week. It's been in our national psyche as the number one sport for many, many years, and good luck unseating King football, as it turns out. But when it comes to young athletes and two-sport athletes, which are in shorter supply than they used to be sure, but there are still two-sport athletes, like, as I mentioned, the University of Oklahoma quarterback, as he's known to most people, Kyler Murray, who could enter the NFL draft. He has to make a decision here coming up in the next day, I believe. He's already been drafted in the Major League Baseball selection show, though. The Oakland Athletics have his baseball rights. If Kyler Murray wants to go ahead and pursue baseball, he'll be in Oakland A. And as we all know, baseball and football have very different paths to the top. In football, if you're drafted and you're a top-of-the-line prospect, especially a quarterback, you're probably going to start your first year. Or if you're going to a good team, maybe you'll have an apprenticeship type of a situation like, say, Aaron Rodgers did under Brett Favre about 10 years ago. But then you'll get your shot. You'll get your chance, pretty much guaranteed. In baseball, nothing's guaranteed. And not only that, not only is nothing guaranteed in baseball because it's more of an experienced player's sport, even now with younger players getting bigger and better chances with these lower revenue teams, with these smaller market teams like the Oakland A's. Even now, baseball requires more seasoning to be really good at it. It's more of a craft, or it is more of a craft than it is a pure athletic competition, because you have to understand the pitcher-batter confrontation. That's the central conceit in the sport of baseball. That's what you have to get your arms around, whether you are a pitcher or a hitter, or if you're a fielder. It takes a little bit of time to burnish those skills, and base running, base stealing, all these things get better with age, at least for the most part, until you get to your late 20s. Whereas football, you can come in and pretty much dominate from the start. Look at young Patrick Mahomes, who has a baseball connection. His dad used to pitch for the Pirates, among other teams, but the quarterback for the Chiefs, second full season here. Really the first full season starting as a quarterback for the Chiefs, and look at him go. Not that there aren't rookie sensations in baseball, but football, for the most part, you got to get it done in your early to mid-20s before your body breaks down, too, so there's a lot of urgency there. And not only that, in baseball, you have to go through the minors for the most part. Very rare is the player that goes straight to the major leagues. If Kyler Murray signs with the Oakland Athletics, even if he signs a major league deal, like we saw Pedro Alvarez do with the Pirates about 10 years ago, because he had big-time leverage there, even if you sign a big league deal, you're going to start in the minors. You're going to take some time, 2, 3, 4, even 5 seasons before you get to the major leagues, and that's for the ones who go about it relatively quickly. So it's more of a slow burn, even though in baseball, to the credit of the Players Union and all the folks who have laid that labor groundwork in the past, the contracts are guaranteed. Football, they're not. So there's a real dichotomy here. And for a player like Kyler Murray, who you've probably heard of if you follow college football, for a player like that who won the Heisman Trophy, put up historic numbers, who has a choice here, it's not that easy of a choice. And if you're saying, well, Matt, I know you don't like football necessarily anymore. You don't think people should play football because of how it breaks your body down, of how it breaks your mind down. Perhaps more importantly, you might not be able to remember your own name by age 40 or 50. You might end up having severe mental illness. You might end up like Junior Seau, killing yourself because you can't stand to survive. You can't stand to exist as your current self, primarily because of what football did to you. You're probably saying, well, Matt, of course you're going to say that Kyler Murray should go into baseball. Well, I would say not so fast on that, because number one, it's not my decision. I can't truly understand what he's going through for a player, for a young person to have the opportunity to play both baseball or football at a high level. And before you say, well, he could play both, he could be like Bo Jackson or Deion Sanders, you can't really do that anymore. It's tougher. Sports are more refined than they used to be even 20, 30 years ago. I'm not sure teams would be open to that possibility, first and foremost, as the money in these two sports has gone up and up and up. So teams are less willing to take on risk of having an athlete get hurt in a sport that's not the sport that they're paying him to play. So let's throw that off the table right away. But second of all, it is so difficult to get to the top level of any sport. You need that motivation every day. You need that passion, right? And unless it's a dead heat, unless Kyler Murray absolutely has a passion for both football and baseball, what I would advise him is whatever you're most passionate about, go into it. Because if you want to have a chance at success, if you want to achieve all the potential that you have at your feet, then you have to grind at it day after day after day. And I'm not telling him anything that he doesn't already know, but once you start getting paid for it and once you start to get up there in years, it doesn't become any easier to get out of bed, for sure, and get after it. And once you have a contract, too, that motivation isn't dangling in front of you. So you have to be motivated by the passion, by the love of the game, for the risk of being cliched and trite. But it's true. You have to have it. And as you get older, you realize that more and more, that if you're going to be a Tom Brady who wants to play into his mid-40s or even beyond, if you want to be a Jaromir Jagr, for instance, to use a hockey reference, if you want to be, for instance, in the sport of baseball, a player who plays into his 40s, like a Julio Franco, or even a player who gets into his late 30s and who still has joy for it and still wants to do it, you have to love it. So unless it's a dead heat in Kyler Murray's mind between baseball and football, don't make the choice because of money. Don't make the choice because of risk. Make the choice because of passion. That's what I say. Now, if it is a tie or relatively close, then yeah, I would say pick baseball because the money's guaranteed, because obviously the Oakland A's are worried about losing you to the sport of football, so you can get that major league contract and get that big league guaranteed money. And also that'll motivate the A's to promote you a little bit quicker through their minor league system if you are doing well compared to a player they just have signed to a minor league contract for lesser money. Because you are counting against their major league payroll, I think the A's would be more willing to bump you up that ladder quicker, and you won't have to be riding on buses in the Midwest League and eating at Chick-fil-A or McDonald's at 3 in the morning and trying to get some shut-eye at a Motel 6. Well, they're not a Motel 6, but a Hampton Inn. It's not exactly the Hilton. It's not exactly the places you'll be staying as a football player. It's not that kind of travel. It's not that arduous. It's not going to take that kind of patience if you do play football, for sure. So, and then there's the fame qualities of it, another thing of which I can't understand. He's already famous, Kyler Murray, for playing football. Is he willing to give all that away? I'm not sure I would be, because you say that baseball might have the most security long term, but if you make a name for yourself, if you become a celebrity and you only play 3 years of football, you can trade on your name for years and years to come, getting endorsements, getting a broadcasting career going, for instance. It's worked in the past for guys who trade on their personality and for what they did on the field. And no offense to baseball, but it's not in the cultural zeitgeist as much as it used to be. And it's not certainly on a platform as high as the NFL will get you. So when you say that more security would come from baseball, both physical security and financial security, I would say I'm not sure that's even really the case here. So for me, there are some real dilemmas, some things to think about, and I'm sure his agents, his advisors, his family and friends have all, in some form or fashion, gone over this with him. But I'm just saying it's not as straightforward as you might think, baseball versus football. And, you know, I brought up 40, 50 years ago when football started to take over. That's not just in our minds as a sporting populace. It's also in the minds of athletes who are making choices like this one. And whereas baseball might have been more of a no-brainer 20, 30, even 10 years ago, I think now if you factor in the fame qualities, you factor in the ability to make money away from the playing field, then maybe it's closer than we think, or maybe the security aspect of it, despite having to throw yourself into the modern-day version of the Roman Colosseum if you are playing NFL football, in the face of all that, maybe there's more security in playing football if you are a top-of-the-line star. Now, if you're not, say if you're, you go back to the early part of this century, Drew Henson. He was drafted by the Yankees. You might recall he also played football at the University of Michigan, and he had a chance to play both, but he wasn't a Heisman Trophy winner. He wasn't a guy who was already famous for playing football. So for me, back then, I think baseball would have been the better route for him. But for right now in this situation, I think a ready-made star like Murray would be hard-pressed to find a way in which baseball is the absolute slam dunk choice for him here. So let me know what you think. Facebook and Twitter. Again, I'm on both platforms very frequently. It's part of my job, of course, at RMU in the Media Relations Department, but I do like to interact with folks who are of like mind or maybe want to disagree with what I have to say here. What would you advise Kyler Murray? Would it be football or would it be baseball as these two sports go head-to-head once again in perhaps a different situation than we're used to seeing them go head-to-head? This is Matt Geico. This is my show. It's called Geick's Got Game. Thank you for listening or watching if you are on the live stream on this Monday morning. When we return, Alan Saunders will put his 2 cents in on this topic and many other topics on the other side of this break on the River's Edge.
Hey, it's Mike Sasson. Guess what? You used to love us at 10. You're going to love us even more at 9. It's me. It's Alex. It's funniness. It's guests. It's all sorts of me yelling into microphones only 1 hour earlier. It's exactly what you need at 9 o'clock. It's like a shot of adrenaline. It's the Mike Sasson Show, now starting at 9 o'clock on Tuesday on the River's Edge, a new kind of radio.
That's the Hawkeyes. Some local music on the River's Edge. We're built on local music, so no surprise. You might recall the Hawkeyes if you were at Heinz Field for the Stadium Series game between the Penguins and the Flyers. Well, I guess that would be almost 2 years ago now. The Hawkeyes performed. I forget if it was before the game or at intermission, but it was really cool to see them playing there live as I was covering the event because I know I had heard some of their music here on the River's Edge. Who knows? Maybe the NHL was listening to the River's Edge.
That's my guess.
Yeah, that's Brian Crawford. He'll have his River Talk coming up at 10 o'clock. New time for Geick's Got Game. No longer Fridays at 10. It is now Mondays at 9. So it's Geick's Got Game followed by River Talk, and we intersperse the local music. Hey, by the way, did you remember that the Penguins are playing in another outdoor game coming up here? I forget even when it is. Is it early March or late February? They're playing at Philadelphia, so it's the same matchup that it was at Heinz 2 years ago, but they'll be playing at Lincoln Financial Field, well, which is now wide open through the rest of the winter and spring with the Eagles being eliminated, but neither here nor there. The Penguins still haven't unveiled their uniforms, which I'm waiting for, of course. If you know me, you know I'm always looking to see what they've cooked up in terms of what they're going to wear. We've seen a lot of gold on some leaked logos and things of that nature, some leaked memorabilia for the Stadium Series. It's weird, though, we haven't seen it come out yet, maybe because the Penguins have already started a third jersey this year, which is based on their previous outdoor game, that bright gold with the gold helmets and the gold socks. Anyway, well, It's always a potpourri when I talk to Alan Saunders anyway, so I don't have a problem with a weird lead in. Alan, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for adjusting to the new time. I know you're up anyway. You have a young daughter, so it's not like you're sleeping in most mornings, are you?
No, I've been up for a while, and it's perfectly for me. That's great. It's a nice move.
Nice. Well, I'm feeling all right so far, so that was my concern. Can I get the juices flowing at 9 as opposed to 10? I think all systems are go to this point. Now, I don't know if you heard any part of the first segment here, but I was talking about Kyler Murray and the decision he has coming up. He has to decide whether he wants to declare for the NFL draft. The star quarterback for the University of Oklahoma, the Heisman Trophy winner this past December, Kyler Murray, has already been drafted by the Oakland A's of Major League Baseball, and they're negotiating a big league deal with him so they can maybe motivate him to come play for them as opposed to whichever NFL team might be right there at the top of the draft and wanting to pick him up. So what would you advise Kyler Murray? I went over the reasons why I don't think it's as much of a financial slam dunk for baseball just because he's already a celebrity in football. So what's your feel on this situation?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry about that. Did you catch my question about Kyler Murray?
I did. So I think if you play any position other than quarterback in football, it's kind of a slam dunk. And also, it leaves the option of both on the table. Right? Yeah, I mean, like if you're good enough, teams will put up with a lot, including, missing some games at the beginning of the year. I mean, they did it with Deion Sanders. I would assume that the teams would be willing, if you're good enough, to deal with you missing, September. But not at a quarterback position.
Yeah.
Quarterback is so important to the entire offense that they're not gonna put up with you not being there until October, maybe November. So playing both is out for a quarterback, and I think quarterback is the one position where you can look at the money that you make in the NFL, and it's actually kind of comparable. It's comparable for two reasons. One, just quarterbacks get drafted a lot higher in general. There are usually 3 or 4 quarterbacks, maybe 5 quarterbacks sometimes taken in the first round of the draft. That's more than most positions. And because the NFL has a draft slot system for the way they sign their rookies, being drafted in the first round means, unlike in baseball, you get drafted in the first round, you get a bigger signing bonus. But in football, you get drafted in the first round, you have a larger salary for 4 or maybe 5 years of your career. So I think it means more to be drafted in the first round in football. Quarterbacks are more likely to be drafted there. And there's a one NFL position that is very highly paid for success. If you're a successful NFL quarterback, you make more than many baseball players, or at least on the same level as a high-level baseball player. And you get your money so much faster. I don't know Kyler Murray. I don't know his character, but if you're the kind of person that can take care of your money and you can make $30 million over your first 5 years instead of not making anything other than that initial signing bonus, that could be a huge windfall financially down the road because of how much sooner you have your money. And then the quarterback position is the one position in the NFL that seems relatively protected from an injury standpoint. I mean, it seems like the league actually does go out of their way to protect the physical toll that a quarterback takes. So, I don't know. I think if he's a first-round pick, it makes a lot of sense for him to play football. But then you have to just go. I feel like you also need a huge dose of personal preference in this, because neither sport is one you can really do unless you really love it and you really want to do it. You're not going to be successful at a high level. So I think he's really, to me, I think the money, you could make a good argument either way. He's really got to decide what he wants to do badly enough to put up with whatever it is the downside of that sport, whether it's 5 years of riding buses in the minors or it's absorbing 350-pound defensive tackles in football. I think that, to me, that's the biggest factor.
Alan Saunders is our guest on Geik Scott Game. He of the Associated Press and Pittsburgh Sports Now, and always game for any type of sports discussion, so I figured you'd have a feeling on that. I said almost the same thing you did right there at the end, Alan. I said that it does come down to passion because it's hard to succeed at the top level, and you're going to have to get yourself out of bed. You're going to have to get to training sessions, get to rehabs as it may be. You're going to have to, even though you're making a lot of money, you're going to have to be highly motivated. So in the end, which do you like better is what I would probably tell them in that case. Well, let's move on to other things here. The big story around town in at least local pro sports is the Antonio Brown situation. And Alan, I find it funny how there are plenty of people who are saying, well, trade him, release him, whatever. And I understand all those feelings too. But we're also getting a Ben Roethlisberger backlash. And we've even seen from anonymous NFL players in a survey taken on The Athletic that he's one of the teammates that you would least like to have in the NFL, at least according to this survey, which, as I said, didn't have any names attached to it, but sometimes, well, most times, people are more honest in those situations. So is that part of it fascinating to you, too? Because there's a lot of, Antonio Brown's maybe a head case, maybe a diva, maybe a bad teammate in a lot of ways, and he has been for a while. But, well, hey, look over here at Ben Roethlisberger. He's not exactly a saint in the locker room either. What's your feeling on how that's developed here lately?
I think an underrated part of the discussion here is that, this whole thing comes to a head the week that the Steelers are playing the Cincinnati Bengals on a Sunday afternoon, and apparently, Antonio Brown goes off on practice on Wednesday, doesn't return anybody's phone calls, has his agent call Mike Tomlin on Sunday, still hoping to play, and no one knows anything about this until long after the fact, after the Steelers' season was over. And, the media at that point has significantly restricted access to the team compared to during a game week when you can wander around that locker room and talk to whoever you want about whatever you want. So somebody on that team wanted people to know what happened with Antonio Brown, why Antonio Brown didn't play that day. And so, who's the guy on the team that's going to make that call to someone in the media? I don't know. To me, I think the quarterback's the prime suspect. If I'm standing around in the locker room like, how'd this get out? So I think that, I don't think that he is by any means not a part of this entire circus that has become the Pittsburgh Steelers. But at the end of the day, he showed up to play on Sunday and Antonio Brown didn't.
Yep.
And so whatever ill you may ascribe to Ben Roethlisberger, I think it needs to be it's an entire class below what Antonio Brown did to the people in that locker room. I think that is one of those things that, man, even if he's a really good player, you can forgive a lot. I'm not sure how much his teammates are going to be willing to forgive that. And I think that's when you do – I don't think the team can get to a point with a player as talented as Antonio Brown that they would say, it's not worth it for us to have this guy anymore. Let's get rid of him. The team is – I'm talking about from the front office perspective. But I think the team from the players' perspective can get there. And if that happens, I think it's a very difficult situation to navigate for the Steelers.
Well, yeah, we can all agree on that. And I don't envy any of the people in that front office right now who have to make that decision because, well, every team in the NFL knows that Antonio Brown is in some ways damaged goods, at least in terms of his relationship with the team. And they know that the Steelers want to get rid of him, most likely. When you go by what the team president, Art Rooney II, said, in fact, to Jerry Dulac of the Post-Gazette earlier this week. Alan Saunders is my guest right now. A couple more questions for him here in period number 2 of Geick Scott Game. Alan, is the Pittsburgh-Philadelphia rivalry, so to speak, overrated? I'm just talking about two cities. I tweeted last night that there was a radio DJ in town who said, well, it's a shame the Eagles lost because now we don't have anybody in the state of Pennsylvania to root for in the NFL playoffs. And I'm thinking nobody in Pittsburgh ever rooted for Philadelphia at anything because we're in the same state. So it must be a new DJ in town first and foremost. And for the most part, people agree with me when I tweeted that. But then I thought, well, really, hockey's the only sport where the two teams go at it with anything on the line. And you go to baseball, the Pirates and the Phillies haven't been in the same division for almost 2 decades now, so they don't really play many meaningful games. And in football, they're in opposite conferences, and we don't have an NBA team here in Pittsburgh. So is the Pittsburgh Philly thing actually overrated, or is it more segregated to one sport in particular than maybe might be the popular perception?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a thing. It's a thing even in like non-sports venues. I think. I mean, I think anytime you kind of have two separate power centers within one structure. I mean, East versus West in Pennsylvania high school football is a thing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you want to go to Hershey to beat Central Bucks and the Imhotep Charter and Holy Ghost Prep and all. I mean, that's the whole state of Pennsylvania is structured East versus West. And, I mean, generally, if you're looking at maybe politically, I guess, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia may be more aligned than anywhere else. But, I mean, I think there's definitely a lot to it that goes just beyond the hockey teams. And if you look at college football, maybe it's Eastern third or Eastern 2/3 versus Western third, but you still have a lot of the same idea there. I think it's something beyond just the hockey rivalry, but I also think the hockey rivalry has kind of run out of steam. Like this upcoming outdoor game, I can't care about what happens in one game in Philadelphia right now. I mean, it's just kind of irrelevant at this point. That's kind of sad.
Well, you heard me just at the start of this segment. I don't even know when this game is. February 29th, or February 23rd, pardon me. February 23rd at Lincoln Financial Field. Okay, one last thing for you, Alan, then I'll let you go. Like I mentioned, I know you have a young daughter. I have a 2-year-old son. We got Lucas on the ice at the RMU Island Sports Center for the first time this past weekend. And, he did his best with Dad's help to get around the rink a couple of times. So his hockey brainwashing continues on, and I put brainwashing in quotes. But there's a lot of influence a parent can have over what a kid likes or doesn't like just by the environment they grow up in. Have you had any success in maybe nudging your daughter in a certain direction or two when it comes to sports in her young life?
Not a lot. She's pretty strong-willed. Doesn't take a lot of nudging. I mean, she plays. The one good thing though is that she wants to do everything. So I've never had any issues like getting her to do some things, but we've had like many times where she's had to pick. You can't do this and that; they're happening at the same time. And a lot of times the one I might have preferred to see her do doesn't get picked, but. That's part of the deal, I think. I think especially with girls, they're very, she doesn't want to be put into a box, but she plays softball, she swims, she does color guard, she's a Girl Scout, so she's got, she takes French lessons after school, she's got all kinds of stuff on. My social calendar quite full for 10 years old, and so I don't complain about it too much. But yeah, I mean, I certainly, like, she's not interested in hockey at all. When we go skating, she wants figure skates and not hockey skates, and I don't know. I mean, that would not have been the direction I pushed her, but she is her own person, and I think the older she gets, the more I see that come out. And to be honest, I think that's one of the most interesting and sort of fun parts of parenting is that you don't know what you're going to get, and yeah, I mean, you do have some say and some push in the process, but not all of it, and keeps it interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think we can agree on that, and I'm under no misconception that I'm going to be able to guide him in all ways. I just remember my childhood and being like, well, yeah, my dad likes Notre Dame, so I'm going to root against Notre Dame. So that's just one good example of that little phenomenon. No matter whether.
Don't root for the Flyers, all right?
Oh yeah, well that's out of the picture. Yeah, he already knows how to say Crosby, so I think he'll be on the black and gold side. That's Alan Saunders. You can find him at Pittsburgh Sports Now, where he covers all things Pitt sports to a T. Of course, it's basketball season, and Coach Capel has the Panthers looking pretty good. He's also the owner of Pittsburgh Hockey Digest, and he's got Brian Mitchell running things there, and it's a tremendous website as well. We've discussed that previously on the show. And when baseball season comes around, you'll be seeing him covering things for the Associated Press too. So, Alan, have a great day, have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Back in a bit, third period time coming up on Geiks Got Game.
Hey, this is David from Pet Clinic, broadcasting from Mr. Small's Theater. You're listening to the River's Edge Radio Network.
You never know what's going to take off on social media. Welcome back to Geiks Got Game. I thought it was just a one-off tweet. It was a one-off tweet last night about the radio DJ. I forget if it was on 100.7 or 96.1, one of the pop stations. I was looking for something to amp me up before I played some hockey down in Harmarville. But the DJ saying that, the Eagles lost. Now we have no one in Pennsylvania to root for. That's been one of my most viral tweets, if you will, in my tweeting career. Put that in heavy air quotes. So it's always funny. You never know what's going to take off. I guess the take that I had that Pittsburgh and Philadelphia might as well be in different countries, that resonated with some people, including my friend Tim Ear, news anchor down at WSAZ in Charleston and Huntington, the NBC affiliate down there. He says, we almost admit last February, for the first time ever, we wanted the Eagles to win, anyone over the Patriots. Yes, there are special cases. I mentioned the Patriots earlier there once again in the AFC title game coming up next week. Yes, I think most people in Pittsburgh were rooting for the Eagles in that game to try to deny Brady and the Patriots another Super Bowl. And guess what? The Eagles did come through for us. So Philadelphia, not worthless after all. And, we're two-thirds of the way through the show, so I do want to go look over at Facebook as well and see if there are any comments. And our friend Jared Wickerham, our frequent listener and sometime guest on Geiks Got Game, chimes in on the Kyler Murray debate from period number 1 today. He said, look at what Jeff Samardzija, the former Notre Dame wide receiver and went on to pitch, or still is pitching, in Major League Baseball. Look at what Jeff Samardzija did, says Jared. He was a tight end. I think he was a wide receiver, technically, but he was a receiver, not a quarterback. But he's certainly in much better physical shape pitching than being hit week after week after week. And yeah, the type of wide receiver that Samardzija was, especially, he wasn't an Antonio Brown type where he was going to be elusive and quick. He was a go over the middle and take punishment type of a wide receiver. So he made the right choice. Again, he's not like Murray where he was the Heisman Trophy winner, where, he was certainly well known. He was the Shark, you might recall, about 10 or 15 years ago at the University of Notre Dame. He was a big name in college football, no doubt. And so he probably could have traded on his name in that way. He could have built on that celebrity, which is in many ways the business when you are an athlete, an independent contractor in that way. So I'm not saying that football would have been a wrong decision for Samardzija to pursue, but he was drafted and went on to pitch for the Cubs, first of all, and he's been around a little bit, been around the block. But even though he's just been an average major league pitcher and a reliever at that, not necessarily a starter for very long in his career, he's made quite a bit of money, and as Jared says, in much better physical shape. I don't think he's going to have to worry about CTE or post-concussion syndrome or anything like that. So hindsight being 2020, yeah, Jeff Samardzija made the right decision. I'm not sure it's so clean-cut, though, for Kyler Murray. And so that'll be something that he'll have to reconcile with down the line. And as always, we can only make the decisions based on what we know now. So I'm not one to look after the fact. In fact, I'm not one to always say, well, we'll wait and see. Time will tell on this decision. Well, no, you didn't have the future at your disposal. You didn't know the future. At least I don't think you did. You knew the future when you were making the decision. So you can only judge the decision based on the information available at the time. And as it is right now, I think it's pretty close to a dead heat with Mr. Murray. And I thought it was fascinating that Alan Saunders, in our previous segment, said the same thing I did. Which sport do you have the most passion for? Because you're going to have to grind through some adversity and some difficulties, physical and mental, in order to make it to the top and access that potential. So there you have it. On to period number 3, and thanks to all who are watching on Facebook, who are listening on the live stream at riversedgepgh.com. I also want to remind you that Brian Crawford's River Talk program is coming up at 10, so stick around. Aubrey Burchell from the recent season of American Idol, a local product. She is Brian's featured guest. He already got plenty of great feedback on the show when he aired it live on the stream. It's coming up on the audio stream again here, though, at 10 o'clock. 10 to 11 is River Talk. Aubrey Burchell and much, much more from the man to my left, to your right, Brian Crawford. So let's get to the final period, the final regulation period, at least, of Geics Got Game for this week. And I want to talk hockey, kind of, although it's more about just pro sports, or maybe just big-time sports generally speaking. So you can throw college into the mix, too. The firing culture of sports. There was, speaking of tweets, there was a great tweet that got me thinking last night from Corey Pronman. He's a prospects writer in the sport of hockey for The Athletic, and Corey had a couple of things to say. He said that maybe people's first reaction when teams underperform relative to expectations shouldn't be to reach for the eject button. It shouldn't be to say, fire this guy, fire that guy. And the primary point here, Corey's not being soft on management or soft on coaching. He's saying that in the world of sports, where it's a zero-sum game, meaning you win or you lose. In the NHL, there's some wiggle room there with overtime losses and some points that you get. But for the most part, you win or you lose. And when it comes to the playoffs, which most of us give the highest importance to, you win or you lose. But in sports, it's not like any other industry, or it's not like most industries, because of that direct competition. Not every team, as Corey said last night, and I completely agree, not every team can win. Not every team is in a position to win. And I bring this up in the context of Randy Carlyle, the former Penguins defenseman from way back in the day. He's still the only Penguins D-man to win the Norris Trophy. Some trivia for you. When he played for them with that beautiful fro flopping in the breeze in the early 80s, before the Penguins took off with the help of Mario Lemieux and others. But Randy Carlyle has carved out a pretty good career as an NHL coach. Now his teams, by modern metrics, by shot attempt metrics, the ones that we use to tell where the game is being played, to use a Mike Sullivanism, his teams typically are on the back foot a lot. And maybe his tactics are out of date. Maybe he should be fired as coach of the Anaheim Ducks, who, after the Penguins came back and beat them the other night, 7-4, have lost 10 games in a row, whether in regulation or in overtime or a shootout. The Ducks are still in a position to make the playoffs, but I think we can all agree outside of Pittsburgh native John Gibson and net, they've stagnated to a large degree. And a lot of that should be placed at the feet of their general manager, Bob Murray. Randy Carlyle didn't take a question about his job security very well the other night. He called it a dumb question and ended his post-game presser. I don't think it was a dumb question necessarily, but I do think that overall, putting the Carlyle and the Ducks situation aside, even someone like myself who tries to look at the bigger picture, for the most part, we can get caught up in the emotions of the wins and the losses. And sometimes owners can get caught up in that, and they can make rash moves. Sometimes general managers can get caught up in that, and they can make rash moves too, just because of that zero-sum thing that I talked about. You win or you lose. So that necessarily means that maybe some teams aren't going to be in a position to win. So if they don't win, maybe they should not be looking to fire everybody at the top. And I think actually teams are getting better at this in this new data-driven world of big-time athletics. You are seeing, I believe, more patience in general. And for the first time in a long time last season in the NHL, we had no midseason coaching replacements in a league that sometimes has fired coaches. In the Penguins' case, after 4 games, remember Ivan Halinka in the 2001-02 season, perhaps some mitigating circumstances there because he didn't learn the English language as he promised to over the offseason. And when the team got off to a winless start through 4, they replaced Ivan Halinka, even though they made the conference final the previous season. But hockey, generally speaking, and really pro sports overall, are pretty trigger-happy when it comes to firing the coach and even the general manager at times. I feel that as we're understanding that we need more data to really assess a coach's performance, and even with a lot of data, it's tough to suss it out and figure out, well, what part of it was coaching, what part of it was players underperforming, and of course there's always going to be that synergy in the middle, and perhaps impossible to separate completely. But you look at a sport like football and the NFL, you get 16 games in pro football, and on a per-season basis, I know it's 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 months in charge. You could say, well, you can learn a lot about a person from that long in charge, and I'm not going to disagree with you there. But just in terms of the results of the sports team, you get 16 data points to work with there. just in general, in terms of wins and losses. That's 10 times fewer than you get in the sport of baseball over the course of one season. That's 5 times fewer than what you get in hockey or basketball, at least in the NHL or the NBA. So I think caution should be the rule of the day there. And I also think it's unfair. I think it's tremendously unfair to have coaches feel like, especially coaches, because we all know they're the first ones to go, it seems like. It's unfair to have coaches perform under that constant specter of being fired too. And I don't know what's being said behind the scenes. I don't know if that's what's going on in Anaheim here. But I do know that people, for the most part, don't take chances. They don't be very creative. They aren't being very creative when they are under extreme pressure. They will simply do the thing that they think will keep them in that job. And that's not necessarily the good thing for the team at large on the long term or even the short term, because when we are in survival mode as human beings, we look very short term, as I said. And so often that leads to suboptimal decision making. It leads to panic. And, it leads to letting the most primitive parts of our brains override. And that's not the part of your brain you want running things. You want to be analytical. You want to take all the information that you have into account in order to make the right decision. So when I think back to earlier this season, I saw some people out there. I know that it's just some people. I know that social media gives some megaphone they otherwise wouldn't have had in the past. But I will say that it shocked me to see people say, maybe it's time to move on from Mike Sullivan. Are you kidding me? He had one season where he didn't win the Stanley Cup out of 3. And even then, they took the eventual Cup champions to overtime in a 6th game. It's not like they embarrassed themselves in the playoffs. Pro sports is a tough business. It's difficult to win back-to-back, to have a winning season back-to-back, let alone have a championship-winning season back-to-back like Mike Sullivan did. I think Mike has proven the benefit, or to have had the benefit of the doubt, or he should have had the benefit of the doubt, and I think he's gotten that, at least for the next year or two. You look at Mike Tomlin here across town, down at the south side. Maybe it's time to consider his job security. I know many of you have. I know I have in the past 2 or 3 years, but that's after giving him many, many years to build up a track record and see what he can do with the luck that's involved in pro sports, with the things that are out of a coach's control. I think it's only for the best to be patient as a default, barring some sort of gross misconduct, barring some sort of criminal charges, barring some sort of dereliction of duty from a head coach. I think it's completely appropriate to lean more toward the side of patience and get away from this firing culture that for so long has pervaded pro sports, especially. In college, I think coaches have a little more job security. In pro sports, it hasn't always been the case, and I don't think that leads to good performance from the players or from the coaches themselves. So like I said, I think we're getting to a spot where this is not that common of a thing, but overall, I would say that if you are one of these people out there who watches your team underperform, at least against your expectations, and you say, well, fire the coach, make a change, think about how you would perform in that situation if you were the coach and you were feeling like that you were constantly on the verge of having your job security questioned. In the real world, it doesn't happen that way. It's not a win or a loss type of a thing in most of our industries. In most industries, you can have a reasonable expectation of success, and it's not at the expense of some other company directly. Now, there is some level of zero-sum in any capitalistic enterprise, right? Because there's only so much market share you can get, but you can also expand your market. You can do some things to be creative and grow the pie for everybody. That's not necessarily the case. In fact, it's not the case at all when it comes to wins and losses in pro sports. So leave it at there. We'll leave it at that, and we'll go on from there into overtime on Gike's Guy Game. We'll keep it here. No final break here on this show as we have a hard out at 10 o'clock for Brian Crawford's River Talk. So I did want to get back to what I was talking about at the end of our interview with Alan Saunders and my son Lukas. We got him on the ice for the first time this weekend at the RMU Island Sports Center. I think I have a photo to share with you if Brian can pull that up before we say goodbye for the week. But any parents out there, I've talked jokingly about brainwashing Lukas into liking hockey. He wakes up first thing in the morning, he's saying hockey and goalie. He loves the goalies, so I could be in trouble there with the expensive equipment. Yeah, there's Lukas, and that's his dear old dad showing him the way on the rink and hoping that he would be able to at least get the concept and stay upright and not just sit down on the ice. He loved it. He was a big fan. We got him some rental skates and put him out there. So one of the real joys of a parent is seeing, I think, your child, your son or your daughter, as it were, develop his or her own interests. And like I said, in our environment at the house, I have hockey on TV all the time. He thinks my laptop is the hockey machine because that's pretty much all that's on it. And I work for the Robert Morris men's hockey team, so that's my job, in addition to being one of my passions, that sport. So it's no surprise that he's picked it up and that he loves to play knee hockey in the front room and in the kitchen sometimes, and he moves the net around, and he has his own little sticks and this and that. So it's really a study in nature versus nurture, right? And like I was saying before, it's tough to separate sometimes the two sides of the argument. Well, is a certain child born with a predilection toward liking sports or liking hockey, or is it just because he was nurtured that way and he was in that environment? I think when it comes to personalities, it's probably more nature than nurture, but when it comes to specifics, for instance, if I didn't grow up in Pittsburgh and didn't grow up watching the Penguins, would I be as much of a hockey fan? Probably not. So the debate rages on, but I'm curious, any of you out there, if you want to get at me on social media, if you're a parent or maybe you're an older cousin, if you're an uncle or an aunt, have you had any success, so to speak, in getting the younger family member of yours, the younger person in your life, to follow along in your footsteps? Not that I was pushing him necessarily. I was just exposing him to the environment, and look what happens there. So in a lot of ways, it's a grand science experiment, isn't it? Parenting. And none of us really have all the answers. All we can do is find some best practices, and of course, it helps to have a good partner, as I do with my wife, Jillian. She just laughs sometimes, though, at how much Lucas is really into hockey. And it could obviously change. Childhood obsessions don't always carry over. Like I said, I used to love football as a teenager and as a young adult, and I don't anymore. So I'm not going to take it for granted that it'll continue on for right now. Just enjoying it, especially scenes like this past weekend where we got him out there on the ice and he can enjoy an activity with his dad. So I don't take that for granted at all. I don't take your viewership and listenership for granted either. I don't take Alan Saunders' expertise for granted. I don't take Brian Crawford for granted, for sure. I couldn't do that as well, anywhere near as well, if I had to run the board, in addition to host this show. So thank you for tuning in on this new time. Again, every Monday from here forward in the year of our Lord 2019, it'll be on, it being Geiks Got Game, from 9 to 10 a.m. And you can catch us on the archive, whether it be on Facebook or at riversedgepgh.com. One last time from Mr. Small's Theater in Millvale, I'm Matt Geica, reminding you that when the radio fades, you know life's moving fast. Have a great week. Talk to you next Monday.